Welcome to the Short Horror Beercast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Alec.
And we are going to begin the way we should begin every episode by saying cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, friend.
Cheers.
Today we're covering a story called Fritzchen by Charles Beaumont. Mr. Charles Beaumont, that is. And what do you have in the glass there to go with Fritzchen?
I came loaded for bear, buddy.
Nice, okay.
It's called Great Lakes Brewing Company.
Okay.
I think they're in Ohio, but everyone in Michigan drinks it too. And they have Lake Erie Monster.
Oh, nice.
It is a pretty heavy-duty beer. It's 9.5.
Wow.
Pretty solid. Double IPA.
Nice.
I was reading a review on it. I've never had it. I've seen it, but never did it. And some guy said it's kind of the viscosity of motor oil.
Okay.
I don't think he loves double IPAs, though. He was pretty negative on it. And I'm finding it pretty nice.
Oh, nice. Okay.
At 9.5, I'm gonna.
Yeah, of course. You will eventually. Let's put it that way, if you don't right now. My favorite review for a beer, it was called Green Rooster. It's probably not around anymore, but it was literally green. God knows what they used to.
What, the beer was green?
The beer itself was green, and the review was 4 words: soapy, sticky, unpleasant, green.
You're like, I'll have one.
Exactly. I mean, come on.
That's a crazy review.
All right, I went a slightly different route. I always say that. I went a slightly different route. No, but I did because this was a hard one.
It was a hard one.
Yeah, I was like, what? I'm thinking, beers with the name Monster in it or whatever, like you chose that, but I was looking for something in the title. But then I was like, all right, let me think of beer quality, like the actual experience, the flavor experience and all that. There's a brewery called Smutty Nose.
Nice.
And they came up with a beer called Old Brown Dog, an American brown ale, but it has this kind of wet, earthy quality to it. And I was like, that works for this.
That does work.
Our listeners will find out why soon enough. Fritzchen. I'm trying to figure out how to pronounce it. It was either Fritzchen or Fritzchen. And
yes, I had to use an audiobook for this one because I couldn't find the book anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's how he was saying it, Fritzchen, like kitchen.
So this is by Charles Beaumont. Let's talk a little bit about him. Born Charles Leroy Nutt back in 1929. N-U-T-T. He said he changed his name because he was tired of being made fun of. So 1929, it makes him 24 years old when he wrote Fritzchen. So again, makes me seethe with jealousy.
That's amazing.
It is. These guys were just born to write. They couldn't have been anything else.
Oh, for the record?
Yeah.
This collection of stories on Audible is opened by Ray Bradbury.
Yes.
And it's pretty great because I didn't know about this author. And man, was he respected by his peers.
Oh, absolutely.
Pretty great.
I used to be able to do Ray Bradbury.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
I'm trying to think of something he would have said.
Rod Serling came to me one day, to end everything with, and I recommended Charles Beaumont. That's B-E-A-M. I don't know.
That's good.
I haven't done it in a while, but
I thought you were pulling my leg. You're going to be like, it's Ray Bradbury. How's it going?
This is Ray Bradbury. So anyway, the story goes is
that's
when,
a good impression.
Thank you. Mom and Dad are proud.
We'll have to do a show on our best impressions that are absolutely terrible.
That'll be a bonus episode.
Yeah, for sure.
So the story goes that when Rod Serling was starting up the Twilight Zone, he needed material. He couldn't write everything himself. So he went to what was then the premier authority on science fiction and fantasy, and that was Ray Bradbury. And Bradbury said, I got 2 names for you. he said Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont. Okay, both these guys have been publishing tons of stories to very high acclaim, as you said, by fans and peers alike. Mm-hmm. Both would go on to write some of the most memorable episodes of the show, often adapting their own short stories. Beaumont's contributions included The Howling Man, great episode about the monastery that keeps the devil in prison.
Right. Yep.
He wrote Living Doll. That's the one with the talking doll with Telly Savalas. My name's Talking Tina.
Talking Tina.
Beaumont wrote screenplays as well, notably those really cool old Roger Corman movies. By the way, RIP Roger Corman, just died recently. Those Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe movies like The Haunted Palace and all that. Beaumont worked on all those. Anyway, let's talk about Fritzchen. This is originally published in 1953 in the very first issue of Orbit Science Fiction, a short-lived pulp magazine. Only had about 5 issues. It was only his fourth sale. But like I said, he'd go on to have an incredibly prolific career. His life was cut tragically short. It's one of the saddest stories you'll ever hear. We'll get into it later on because we don't want to dampen the mood.
Right. Yeah.
But it is a very sad story, and it's one of these stories that's like every writer's secret fear. That's enough of a tease. We'll talk about that later. And so let's get into it, shall we? So we open on this isolated cove. Our protagonist, Mr. Peldo, Jake Peldo, he's contemplating his life choices. He's a pet shop owner. He doesn't seem too happy with his life. He's like in sort of like a midlife crisis. His wife interrupts him. He's like, go find Luther, our kid Luther, little Luther. There's always a lousy kid in these stories. She's worried that the kid might get lost or fall into the river or something.
Right.
And spoiler alert, that would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, he's not great.
No. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So Peldo goes out to find him. And I love this. He kind of likes being in this tangled mess of weeds hunting for his little brat.
Yeah.
Beaumont says, exciting in a small, tired, remembering way. You're an outdoorsy guy, right?
To a degree, yeah.
You probably are more than I am. I'm the type of guy that brings a hairdryer on a camping trip. But,
yeah, I don't do that. But, okay. Yeah, I mean, I used to be more so before we had a cottage. It was camping in tents and stuff, yeah.
And so, that, I guess that feeling of being almost lost, but not quite in woods and stuff like that. I mean, I used to hike, so I know that feeling of just going off and all of a sudden everything's quiet. You're smelling rocks. You didn't realize rocks had a smell, and you're smelling vegetation. And you're just like, I am just really isolated, and it's exciting. You're tired. It's cool. It's a great little way of encapsulating that feeling when you're in that moment.
Yeah, it is. You can really get centered doing things like that.
Totally.
It seems like when he's doing that feeling doesn't last very long. He has that feeling, like you said, in a remembering way, but pretty soon it gives way to annoyance that he can't find his kid.
Right.
And that he's actually being ignored by this 7-year-old is driving him nuts.
Yeah. He finally finds Luther, though. Kid's playing in the mud by a riverbank. And he's playing with something. Can't see what it is. Right. Wonderful device, by the way, that Beaumont uses throughout this entire story. He teases us with what this thing actually is. I don't think we ever get a full view of it throughout the whole story. We get little bits and pieces and just enough to pique our curiosity about it.
Yeah.
And to know that it's just something that's not right.
Yeah.
The kid's holding this thing in his hands, and his father says, so what do you got there? Kid says, I want to call him Fritzchen. That's how he answers him, little brat. And then Peldo hears the thing. It's this whiny, high-pitched sound, like an animal in pain.
Yeah. What I thought of was when you've got a balloon that's fully inflated, but not tied off, and you're holding the end of it.
Right.
Letting it do those crazy squeaks and squeals and stuff. What is that?
Well, Luther bites his old man's leg. All of a sudden, it's like, for some reason, Luther just snaps. He bites his leg, and Peldo has to smack at him. And he holds Luther's nose and mouth closed until he drops what he's holding.
Yeah.
So, Luther sucks, but Peldo's kind of a terrible dad anyway.
True, but I mean, there's something off with this kid. I mean,
we find out just how
Fritzchen over and over and over, like a,
Yeah.
And what is Fritzchen?
Yeah, God knows.
I mean, what a kid came up with Fritzchen? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then the biting, it's like, kid's off.
Yeah, he's definitely off. So anyway, Peldo sees this thing thrashing on the ground. Of course, we don't, but you can tell by his reaction that he is just enthralled by this weird-ass thing that's just flopping around on the ground. He takes off his jacket, he throws it over it, and then he starts interrogating Luther. Where the hell did you find this? The kid just points to the riverbank, and he says, I snuck up on it when it wasn't looking and caught it.
It's crazy.
Peldo has now pulled the coat off, and he's staring at the thing. And we get a little glimpse into his mind. He's thinking of money. He's thinking of massive wealth, cars and houses, because he's thinking this is his livelihood. We find out Peldo is a pet shop owner.
Yeah.
And I think it looks like he may deal in exotic pets too. So all he sees is money with this thing. He's like, I can really make a buck with this. And you also get his motivation. He can leave.
Yeah, he can get out of that situation because he's this browbeaten,
Yeah.
with a kid that he can't just discipline at all.
Right.
He's like, maybe I can make money and get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Just bail.
All the women he wants, not just any women, infinitely imaginative women.
Yeah, imaginative and accessible.
Yeah, and accessible, that's right.
Oh, crazy.
Good old Peldo.
Mm-hmm.
His wife interrupts this little fantasy of his, and the kid is now sitting submissively on the ground, tries to make a grab at the thing, but then he just sort of gives up and he says, I'll get even with you. And then Peldo's watching the creature. We get a wonderful description.
Mr. Peldo watched the small creature, fascinated, as all its legs commenced to move together. Dwarfed, undeveloped legs burrowing into the viscous ground.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Just enough where you're like, oh man, like now my mind is just going with this thing. What the hell does this thing look like? As he goes on describing it, I almost want to say it looks like a sea pig. I don't know if you've ever seen a sea pig.
Not by name.
I've never seen it one in person, but I've Googled the images, and you can Google sea pig.
Might have to.
Yeah, it's a really creepy looking little sea creature.
Yeah, I've been trying to liken it to something and I can't really.
Yeah.
It's like three different things. So,
Right.
yeah, he says it caused him to shudder slightly too. He's like, ugh, this thing's not right.
Yes. He wraps up the creature in his jacket and he's holding it, and he goes home. His wife isn't happy here either. She's got sinus problems and all this other stuff. And he says, I probably shouldn't show Fritzchen to her yet.
I can hold off on that.
Yeah. Now we get a little break and we switch scenes. And there's a wonderful little interplay between Peldo and his coworker, Saul. And I love Saul.
I like Saul a lot, yeah.
Saul's great. He's an
good.
old man. He's one of the best descriptions ever.
He was old. His mind had fallen into a ravine. It paced the ravine, turned and paced like a contented baboon.
That's awesome.
We all know somebody like that.
That's so
We
good.
know somebody like Saul. Everybody knows a Saul.
Sure.
If not, they should.
I might be turning into a Saul for all I know.
I think I'd there, but for the grace of God, go all of us. Yeah. Peldo walks in with this, his jacket all bundled up. And Saul says, we don't have any empties. He's talking about cages, because God knows how many times Peldo's walked in with something he found. Peldo says, put the capuchin in with the parrot. He says, we're going to need a good cage for this thing. So the thing is spasming within Peldo's coat. This thing is just jerking around in his hands. They get into the cage, jacket and all. We notice there's a purplish stain soaking through.
That's not good.
No, not good, but that's not what's got Saul all freaked out.
The shop has gone completely silent.
Yes.
I think he said it's a roaring silence.
Yes.
Like completely engulfing.
Yep.
And when you're in a pet shop with all kinds of different vocal and physical sounds of animals going throughout the day as like a din, you don't really notice until it's gone.
Yeah.
And you're stuck in a void of what the hell just happened.
Yeah.
And all the animals were wide-eyed and terrified, and they were all staring at Fritzchen,
Yes.
which is crazy.
Yeah, it's a great moment. I love this little detail. During the silence, Peldo just coughs in the middle. And that's literally the only thing that breaks the silence. And it's almost a cinematic use of sound, I realized, in that moment.
Yeah.
Beaumont's already using all the senses here, which is always the hallmark of a great writer.
Right.
So they turn to the cage, the jacket falls away, and Saul cries out. And then we get a break, and every animal is screaming all at once, right after this break. It made me think Beaumont's almost writing this like a TV script
Totally.
in blackouts, right?
Yeah.
Like that would totally be the commercial, and then all of a sudden the commercial comes back and all these things are screaming. Or better yet, they'd probably scream and then we'd go to blackout.
And then you go to the commercial, yep.
Yeah. But it's pretty cool that he breaks it like that.
Yeah.
Because there's no break in time. It's just basically everything's screaming all of a sudden.
The jacket falls away and they can see it. Suddenly they're like incensed and like, holy shit, what is that? What is that?
That's not any one of us.
This is not good.
Yeah.
And they just trip out, they freak out.
Yes. So we come back and Peldo and Saul are discussing this. What the hell do you think this thing is? And Saul says, nearest I can tell, it's like a cross between a whale and a horsefly.
Yeah, that took me a minute until I realized I have no idea.
Right.
That's his answer.
That's
it
exactly.
could be anything. There's a pretty big spectrum between those two.
Right. So Peldo's mind is like still on his riches. He's like, think it's valuable? And by the way, all the animals are still screaming during this whole time that they're having this conversation.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then Saul asks, where'd you get it? And then, little brat Luther comes in and says, he's mine. And Luther puts his face to the cage. He goes up to it and the animal comes forward And Beaumont says, with suction-like noises from its many legs. So again, you get a little more of this thing. Yeah, it's not only does it have many legs, but they have like little suckers on the bottom.
Not good.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Not cuddly.
No, no. Yeah, and that doesn't speak well for Luther either, that he loves this thing so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, so cute.
So neither Saul nor Peldo sees what happens here, but we do. What has happened is that the thing came up and sort of kissed him when he went up there. When Luther goes up to the cage, the thing kind of goes up to him and kisses him. Right. Mrs. Peldo enters and she grabs Luther. And that's when we see there's something kind of gross on the side of Luther's face. This thing left some slime on him. And so Saul goes and puts the coat back over the cage and the place goes quiet. Once again, because like you said, now it's covered up.
Yeah, they're like, ugh.
So Peldo leans in, he lifts up the coat, then he jerks his head back and wipes at his face because the thing put a little of that gunk on his face too. And from within the cage, a sound like a drowning kitten's purr.
It's gnarly.
It's pretty gnarly indeed.
That's pretty bad. And great is what I mean.
Oh, well, absolutely. So Luther throws a shit fit at this because he's like, well, now this thing kissed my dad, and I hate my dad.
Yeah.
So he says he loves you now, and he hates me. For that, Fritzchen's going to pay. So Luther is definitely...
Yeah, he's off the rails.
He's totally off the rails.
That kid's a mess.
So the pet shop is kind of where they live. I guess they live above it, I think. Mm-hmm. So Peldo goes into the shop after dinner. Everything sort of seems normal, but then he realizes it's not because Bess the parrot is dead, and that's not due to the capuchin. There's a pretty nasty scene here of this parrot.
Mr. Peldo finds that parrot covered in that Fritzchen goo, whatever that is.
Yes.
But it's been solidified into like a spongy casing.
Yes.
Gross.
Right. Shuffled off and joined the choir invisible. Little Monty Python reference. So Peldo remembers the goop on his own face, and he yanks the tarpaulin off the cage, and Fritzchen's just chilling out in there. Cage is locked exactly where it was, a good 20 feet away from the parrot cage.
Right.
Peldo looks over at the capuchin. The monkey's like, I don't know.
He's like, wasn't me. Fuck you looking at?
He suspects Luther probably rigged the whole thing.
Right.
And we get a little more insight into just how awful Luther is.
Well, the other thing with that parrot is all its insides were gone.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I skipped a giant plot point here. Yeah.
It was really crazy because it's like bones and all.
Yes, he's kind of a hollowed out shell.
And all the while, Fritzchen is quietly covered in the cage.
Yes.
Probably sleeping off a big meal.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Right, exactly. And so Peldo says, it's probably Luther. He probably rigged this up somehow. He says, like the time he emasculated the parrot trying to turn it inside out.
Yeah, he's starting to materialize as like a checklist candidate for a serial killer.
Big time.
Just all the signs.
Yes, exactly.
Don't like Luther.
I don't know if this is a good place to talk about this, but Beaumont had a pretty weird childhood, apparently. He had a crazy mother who one time killed one of his own pets as a punishment for something.
What?
Yeah. And there's a story called Miss Gentabile, which is in Perchance the Dream, the anthology that Fritzchen appears in. Mm-hmm. He sort of depicts it in there.
Wow.
But yeah, and you just get this picture of this guy having a really messed up childhood and probably working out some issues on paper here.
Well, that'll do it. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.
Right. So the animals start acting up again all of a sudden. I guess maybe because they, he's taking off the tarpaulin, so the animals are getting a little crazed. He turns off the light. They can't see him. Beaumont throws in this. I love this guy. He throws in a line here that, as an editor, I would have taken this out if it wasn't such a great line. Okay? Mm-hmm. The line is, moonlight comes fast to small towns near rivers. Brilliant little line that does nothing for the story, doesn't advance the action, doesn't show character, doesn't do anything. But it's just such a wonderful little observation about now he can see in the dark, sort of, because there's moonlight, and moonlight comes fast to small towns near rivers. It's
really nice. It could fit in a lot of other stories.
Oh,
it's
sure.
It's like a good plug-in almost anywhere. It's just a nice sentence.
Absolutely. So he says, all right, I guess Richard's just sleeping, or like you said, he's probably full. So he's all curled up. And he notices at this point that Fritzchen's mouth is sort of disproportionate to the rest of his body. He's like, is Fritzchen bigger? than he was last time I saw him.
Right.
And he looks over and he sees that he had laid out a meal for Fritzchen. Oysters, ground meat, and milk.
My favorite.
I did a little research. I was trying to figure out what you can make with those things. And I found a recipe for...
You did not.
For
Gross.
oyster dressing casserole.
I'm good.
You can stuff a Fritzchen of your own with this stuff. It's got oyster. The only thing it doesn't have is milk. You can probably work milk in there somewhere, though.
Sure. Have a glass of milk with it.
Yeah. Well, it's got breadcrumbs. Usually you soak breadcrumbs in milk. Yeah. Usually you soak breadcrumbs in milk to use as binder for things like meatballs and stuff like that. So I'll post the recipe in the show notes. He inspects the animal further. We get a little more description. Thing's got no teeth, no gullet. And is that a snout? Fritzchen's got this kind of spiny snout with a florid green cup at the end. It's so bizarre. It almost reminds me of, do you remember Duck Amuck? Looney Tunes cartoon. It's the one where somebody is drawing Daffy Duck. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great one.
It's awesome.
One of the best.
Yeah. And at one point, he turns him into this weird character with like 4 legs in the back.
And a flower head.
Yes, and a flower head. His back are flippers. That almost reminds me of this.
Yeah.
So confirmed also that Fritzchen is definitely bigger. No doubt about it. He's bigger than he was the last time I left him. And so he goes to sleep that night dreaming of his riches.
It's like, this crazy thing is going to be worth a ton.
Yes. We get a scene break, and when we come back, the Peldo's awake to Saul standing in their bedroom. Okay,
Weird.
So, yeah, it's a little bizarre. Saul lives across the street, but,
It's like Sling Blade when he's standing there with a hammer in the doorway while they're sleeping. What are you doing with that hammer? He's like, I don't know. Just woke up holding it. They're like, get out of here.
So Saul says they lost 2 animals, a bird of paradise and a Dalmatian pup.
Isn't a bird of paradise a flower?
It is, but there's also, I had to look this up because it is a flower, but it's also an exotic bird. The flower actually looks like the bird's plumage.
That tracks. That's good.
By the way, I don't know that much about birds. I just know that old people and weirdos keep birds. No, just kidding. I'm kidding. No, but keeping birds of paradise was actually a fad back in the Victorian era. I looked this one up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their feathers were used in like ladies' hats and stuff, and it was just like a little social status thing to have a bird of paradise in your foyer or something. I think it lasted until like the 20s. People started wisening up about
Just put that on the list of bizarre shit from that era.
Right, yeah, right, exactly. People started to get wise about, conservation.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
little things like that,
Reckless, do whatever.
Right.
Kill a bird for wearing in your hat.
Yeah, exactly. Lovely plumage. So, this podcast has everything. You got your history, you got your random factoids, great beer.
You didn't come all this way for nothing.
No reason not to subscribe, right?
Except now we alienated all the bird lovers. The people that keep birds at home.
Exactly.
They're gone.
So, he says the Dalmatian and the bird of paradise pretty much have had the same fate as Bess the parrot. Their innards is gone. That's what Saul says. Peldo looks over at little Luther's there, and Luther sticks out his tongue. Just reach out and smack Luther right here. Saul doesn't know what happened. I mean, the cage was sealed. I picture Peldo shaking his fist at Luther.
Yeah.
Saul says it wasn't the kid. He says it's the critter. It's 3 times the size as it was yesterday. I love this phrase. He says his stomach is all pooched out. I'm going to use that from now on.
That was good.
Too many tacos, my stomach's all pooched out. He says, how did this happen? Luther knows. Luther's theory is that his tongue can extend well beyond its reach. This thing can shoot out 20 feet. He says, I saw him do it in the water. He grabbed a bird right out of the sky.
From a distance.
Peldo springs a dash and get me the numbers of all the museums and zoos in the state. He's got to get rid of this thing for some cash. Now's the time to sell. Saul says, just chuck her where you got her from. This thing isn't any good in anybody's possession. You need to just get rid of this thing. Luther's not happy about this, of course. He takes off. Peldo runs after him down to the shop. Luther down there has got himself a box of matches. By the way, there's a PSA. If you got a kid like Luther, don't let him near matches.
Don't let him near anything.
Especially matches. So he starts lighting matches and tossing him into Fritzchen's cage. We get a great audio thing about their sputtering against wet flesh.
Yeah, I thought that too. I'm like, he threw a match in there. It's not going to do anything. And then he set it. It just damped out next to the thing's slimy skin.
Right. So
useless.
So Peldo throws him out. I picture him getting the old bum's rush by the S of the pants and
throws
the collar.
Luther out.
Get out of here. he hears something crying, right? He hears Fritzchen crying, and he says it's not unmelodious.
A great way to put it. It's not like an incensed wail, like no sense of reason to it. This was helplessness.
Yes.
It's starting to paint a picture that it's the victim.
Right. This little bastard's throwing matches at you. Of course.
Right. It shoots out a fine crystal glaze of puce jam.
That's right. Okay.
That sucked. That was so gross. I don't know what that is.
Well, listen.
Puce
jam. It's a band name is what that is. Oh, it's too close to Pearl Jam, I guess.
I like puce jam better.
Yeah, right. It's just like Judas Hole versus Judas Priest. So anyway, Peldo's still thinking there's still time to make some money off of this thing.
Yeah, well, the thing is now standing straight up.
Yes.
And he's looking at it like, oh, hell yeah, that thing has gotten bigger. Look at that thing. It's crazy. Right. It's like now it's got antennae and claws.
Yes, right.
And he says it's got a mouth that was no longer toothless, but full of sharp brown needles.
Sharp brown needles.
That's like a lamprey.
Yes, right.
A nasty little thing. Those things give me the creeps.
They are really creepy. It's true. Luther comes back in with a magazine soaked in lighter fluid. So, another PSA. You got a kid like Luther, don't let him near magazines and lighter fluid.
Yeah, keep him away from that stuff that burns. What is going on here?
So, he lights it and he tosses it and the can of lighter fluid. And Fritzchen just makes one sound.
The animals in the shop are going crazy again because the thing's visible, but it's not. It made one low sound that came from not his mouth, but like more from the middle of him, like the sounds come out of its body.
They stomp the fire out. Fritzchen is looking extra crispy.
He's out for the count.
Definitely. He's not looking good. He's all blackened and messed up. Luther begins to cry, and then all of a sudden he stops. And Peldo stops, because I got the feeling that Peldo was like in the middle of a Homer Simpson, like, why, you little, you know?
Yeah.
And he stops. Everybody stops. Saul and Edna, they all freeze, because they all hear a sound somewhere far away. Beaumont talks about what it could be, an elephant, or what is it? There's something, he's trying to figure it out what it is.
In that moment, before the rustling sound grew huge, before the windows shattered and the great nightmarish shadow came into the shop, Mr. Peldo understood the meaning of Fritzchen's inconsolable cries. They were the cries of a lost infant for its mother.
Boom.
Beautiful.
I was not expecting that.
No.
Part.
And when you come across, it's almost a cheesy ending. You're like, oh, it's its mom. But at the tail of this story, it just works so well.
Yeah, that was a great ending, I thought. Here comes giant don't know what coming to stomp us all out and save her kid. We're doomed. This is awful.
Again, it's everything you don't see. Before the window shattered and the shadow came into the shop. And that's it. That's all you need as far as what their fate is. Something really bad is going to happen to them. And it's...
yeah, at least Luther's there to get him.
Exactly.
That part's the only happy ending to this.
Or is it? Yeah. The end with a question mark, you know?
Right. Too bad this wasn't a Twilight Zone. This would have been great.
Yeah, it would have been a little too crazy, I think, for back then for the Twilight Zone.
Probably.
Yeah. You know? So... I want to talk just a little bit about what happened to Charles Beaumont later on. He died at 38 years old. What? After just producing a shit ton of stories and teleplays and so forth. He had a weird disease. They think he may have suffered from some weird early onset Alzheimer's or a combination of Alzheimer's and Pick's disease, which is a kind of dementia, because it caused him to age rapidly and lose all his faculties rapidly. By the time he had died in 1967, so like I said, he's only 38, looked and acted like he was 95. And in fact, his son, Christopher Beaumont, said he was 95 by every calendar except the one on your watch. And so even in the last days of the Twilight Zone, I think the Twilight Zone wrapped in 1962, he was already starting to lose it, and he had so many writing obligations. Everybody wanted a Beaumont story, so he would farm out story assignments to friends of his, writers that needed a job, and he'd split the fee with them, something that was a little bit unethical, but he was doing what he had to do. Probably saw that he was losing his abilities and really needed to rake in as much as he could, in the only way he knew how. He did a little acting, too. There's actually a movie called The Intruder that he wrote, and he's in it. And you can see it. He's a young guy, but he does look older. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Harlan Ellison said it was like he had been attacked by one of his stories.
Damn.
Very tragic for a writer, for anybody, and for a writer too, when you just have so many stories to tell and you're relying on your brain and
you're robbed of it.
So it is horrible. So I'm sorry to have to end like that. Let me end on something a little bit brighter. Christopher Beaumont, Charles's son. Very interesting guy. I heard an interview with him one time. Very interesting guy. And then I found out who he actually was when I looked him up on IMDb. He's got some writing credits on TV shows and so forth. And he did a little bit of acting. And most notably, for me anyway, he was Greg Brady's rival on the Brady Bunch. He was a rival quarterback.
What?
And I think he played somebody else too on the Brady Bunch. He turned up on the Brady Bunch a couple of times.
Wow.
So there you have it.
I don't know that show well enough to remember
Unfortunately, I know it better than I care to admit.
Do you remember what his name was?
There was a couple of different ones. I think he was Hank something at one.
Was he Johnny Bravo's rival or Greg Brady's rival?
No, he was actually Greg's rival. He was a quarterback, I think, that stole a playbook from Greg.
I don't know.
And then he was a guy, I think he sold a lemon to Greg, a car that was turned out to be a total. So,
nice.
Yeah. So, I'm going to do a Brady Bunch podcast spinoff of this one, I think. That's what we'll do.
Okay.
All right. So bone up on your Brady Bunch.
I'll do my best.
So this was, how did your beer fare with this story, by the way?
This is a good beer. It's not playing games. It's a pretty heavy duty, like I said, 9.5. This is funny. The guy that sold it to me goes, "Bro, if you're not drunk after 2 of those, you're a bad motherfucker." I was like, dude.
All right.
I am no such person. I'll probably be drunk after 2 of them. Just take it easy. Slow down. You're going to make the sale. Don't freak out.
Exactly.
We're all good here. Yeah, it was the Lake Erie Monster, though. If anyone is a beer lover, which I assume you are, you're here.
Of course.
Check it out. It's good. Great Lakes Brewing, Lake Erie Monster.
And I'm enjoying a smutty nose Old Brown Dog.
I love that name.
Indeed.
I am not being paid by any of them.
Oh, I should mention that. We don't get sponsored by any of these people. Now, we'll welcome sponsors. I'll be glad to plug a beer. But, yeah, we don't get paid for mentioning any of these. We just love these things. So there.
Yeah, we don't get paid for how delicious Lake Erie Monster is. It's just delicious.
Available at fine beer distributors everywhere.
Yep.
All right.
Cool, man. That was a great story. I loved it.
Great story indeed. And we are out. Hey, it's Paul. Don't go yet. I have one thing I just want to talk to you about, and that's subscribing to the podcast. You can do so wherever you want. You can go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe there, or go to the podcaster of your choice and subscribe there. I don't know how they work. There's this thing where you press a button and things come to you. It's great. Or you can visit me at paullorello.substack.com. The link is in the description. There you can find special content that I've created just for you, just for the show. It's pretty amazing. Alrighty. See what you can do about that, will ya? And we'll see you next time.